Welcome and thank you for listening to this talk on shevii, shel Pesach, the unique significance of the seventh day, seventh and eighth day in the diaspora of Pesach, and how we can see them as really closing the circle, as it were. We have an image of concentric circles, circles within circles, and Pesach is its own circle. And we start the first day of Pesach with Yetzias Mitzrayim, with the Exodus from Egypt, and we don't just peter out. The seventh day of Pesach brings us full circle, and if we can imagine that circle to be an enclosure of emunah, of faith in Hashem, and that means that the seventh day of Pesach is a link to the first. It also means that it seals, it gives us this sealed unit of emunah, which we are going to have to access as we proceed into life beyond the high level of miracles that we experience at the time of Pesach, that we experience during our exodus from Egypt. And we are going to go towards life on an everyday basis, and we are going to have to draw on these lessons of emunah. So it's no accident that we read the passage in the Torah that describes the Song of the Sea in morning prayers on a daily basis, and we also read it on the seventh day of Pesach because the splitting of the Yam Suf occurred on the seventh day of Pesach. And so all of these things, I think, really call upon us to understand the unique significance of the events of the seventh day of Pesach and how they fall together to give us this picture of emunah. And first of all, just referencing this concept of seven, and lest we think that the events just happened 7 days after the Exodus from Egypt, the number seven has a unique significance. And we know that Shabbos, the seventh day of the week, is a day that is saturated with Kedusha, and the number seven represents the highest level of holiness, of closeness and connection, potential for closeness and connection with Hashem that comes about through observing various mitzvot that we can achieve. That is represented by the number of seven. And the number seven in Hebrew is spelt Shin Ves Ayin, and this there are two other words that share this root, and one of them is Shavua, which is an oath. And really, what is an oath? An oath is something that we express a very deep commitment. We go beyond the surface level and we accept upon ourselves the extra obligations, that level of commitment that comes from the oath, going beyond the surface. And the other root, the other word that shares this root is sova, which is a satisfaction, which is contentment. And this is the concept of being complete with what one has, realizing that everything, the level of satisfaction that comes from seeing everything as a gift from Hashem and just being grateful in a very deep way, seeing that unique script of my life. And instead of thinking, I want more, I want better, and that doesn't mean that we can't be ambitious in the right ways, but a sense of contentment and satisfaction, as opposed to always wanting something else that somebody else has, or even if somebody else doesn't have it, just wanting more, this wonderful sense of satisfaction. So that also shares the same root as the number seven. And I think that there is this sense of completeness. It links up with Shabbos as a day of the week that helps us achieve this level of contentment as we withdraw from our weekday activities where we are doing, acquiring, and we come to Shabbos and there's a certain sense of handing over the reins to Hashem completely and really just sensing, experiencing this higher level of contentment that comes from Menucha. So I think that this is part of the message of the events of the splitting of the Yam Suf happening on the seventh day. And I think it goes to the question, it goes to the core of Jewish identity. What does it mean to be Jewish? And if you would go to a university campus, for example, and ask even Jewish people who belong to Jewish groups who are affiliated, and ask them what is about Jewish, being Jewish, that is significant to you. How do you define yourself? It would be interesting to see the answers that are given, and I think that many answers for many people will take two paths. One path would be perhaps Jewish accomplishment. They're proud of being Jewish because of Jewish accomplishment, because of the high numbers of Jewish Nobel Prize winners, far beyond the percentage of us as a as the fraction of the total population of the world. So, and also some, and unfortunately possibly not enough, would view Israel, the state of Israel, also as a reason to celebrate, be proud of, define themselves as being Jewish. So that could be one aspect of Jewish definition of sort of defining, seeing themselves as Jewish people. The other negative aspect is that as a result of the persecutions that we have suffered, and of course, if we are in an environment where we're not being persecuted, then that is not going to be something that will give us a sense of Jewish identity. And it's interesting to look, for example, at the many Jewish people who came from the Soviet Union, the former Soviet Union, and the USSR, and they perhaps or generally were not observant Jewish people, but they had a strong sense of Jewish identity because they had Jid stamped on their passports. The persecution, ironically, of the Soviet authorities actually strengthened the sense of Jewish identity. And we see that this happened first in Egypt when the Jewish people were persecuted by Paro, ostensibly as a way of eradicating them. But as happens so often, the persecutions actually reinforced the Jewish identity. And really, the seventh day of Pesach, the events of the splitting of the Yam Suf, give us a much deeper connection to our Jewish identity. And that comes from the injection of emunah, of this deep faith in Hashem, that comes from peeling away all the layers that obscure our relationship with Hashem, that prevent us from seeing Hashem as the one, the reality, the creator, the supreme reality. And I think that there are a few aspects of the Song of the Sea that I want to focus on as a way of giving us this concentrated form of emunah. And the first one is this concept in the middle of the Shira, where we say, Mi chomocha ba'ilim Hashem, that we ask the questions, who is like you among the powerful, how we could say, gods with a small g, who Mi chomocha ba'ilim Hashem, who is like you among the mighty, O God, Mi chomocha nedar ba'kodesh, who is like you, powerful in holiness. And so I think the very asking of this question states the reality that we are asking a question to which we will not have an answer, because we know that we are defining ourselves through a relationship with Hashem beyond definition, beyond comprehension. Yet we are looking at the events that happened at the Yam Suf, and we are acknowledging that we are seeing through the veils of nature, through the miraculous occurrences of the Yam Suf, what happened at the Yam Suf, but we are also translating that into our everyday life. And for that one moment that we are tuned in to the reality of the Yam Suf, we see everything about life through the miracle lens. And so this is, I think, this very significant way of dealing with the emunah that we get from the Shira, from the response to the events of the Yam Suf. And the fact that with the Yam Suf happens, it is water that is the medium through which we learn this lesson. The water links us to the waters, the first of the Esemakos, to the 10 plagues, where the waters of the River Nile turn to blood. And it is, I think, connecting us to that primordial water, to the first waters of creation, to the fact that Hashem, as creator of everything that we know and everything that we don't know, yesh me'ayin, creation of something from nothing, that water is the very basis. Water is that essential life-giving start. And the fact that the events of the Yam Suf happen in water, I think underscores the importance of water. Water in our lives, water as physical beings, but also water in the spiritual sense, above and beyond our physicality, as the events of the Yam Suf certainly witness. And in addition to that particular sort of aspect of the Yam Suf, the water of the Yam Suf, this question, knowing that we can never answer Mi chomecha va'elim Hashem, but we look at the events of our lives, we look at the events that are historically recorded in the Torah, and equally our daily lives, and seeing that the miraculous aspect of the water that we drink, of the water in our bodies, and really focusing on that. And I think that there are three personalities that also help us with this emunah infusion, connected to the events of Kriyas Yam Suf, of the splitting of the Yam Suf. And the three personalities, I would, in chronological order, are Yosef. The three personalities that I would like to refer to. There are actually more in this context, but we start with Yosef HaTzadik, Moshe Rabbeinu, and Nachshon ben Aminadab, and each of them give us another aspect of emunah, and how that linkage, that faith in Hashem, helps us through daily life when there doesn't seem to be a departure from what we regard as nature, and also daily life when there is a departure from nature. So starting with Yosef, the connection between Yosef and the splitting of the Yam Suf is that the Medrash asks, what did the sea see? What did the SEE, what did the Yam Suf see? That it says Ma Ra'a Hayam Bayanos, because we say in Hallel, that we say every day of Pesach, the first the Yom Tov of Pesach, the beginning Yom Tov of Pesach, we say full Hallel, and thereafter we say effectively 6/8. I think of we say everything except for two paragraphs. It's called half Hallel, a bit mathematically inaccurately, because it is more than half. But we read in Hallel, Hayam Ra'a Bayanos, the sea saw and it fled. So the Medrash tells us that it saw the bones of Yosef, because Yosef was buried in the Nile, his coffin was put in the Nile, and he made his brothers promise that he would be, when they left Egypt, they would take his coffin with them. And so it was a special merit of Yosef, and so the sea, as it were, parted in honor of Yosef. And Yosef was the epitome of somebody who, throughout the very deep lows and very meteoric rises and highs of his life, he had this emunah. He learnt the very hard way. As the child, as the immature teenager, he spoke in a way that angered his brothers, and he endured terrible hardships, being sold into slavery, going down to Egypt in this way, and then being successful in his master's house, and then having the temptation of Potiphar's wife, his master's wife, and managing to face every challenge and come through it. And even though he had struggles in doing so, it wasn't easy for him. But he comes through it, and he gets to a perspective of his life where he's able to look back and he's able to see that he everything in his life has been in some way part of Hashem's plan, and for his good and for the good of those around him. And even though during sometimes it must have been very hard for him to acknowledge that, but certainly that is something that he is able to tune into. And when he is on the very high part, when he is successful, when he becomes the viceroy of Egypt, and he really is, except for Paro, the most powerful person in the country, he is always acknowledging that everything comes from Hashem, and it's not him, and it's not his great intelligence, and it's not his great dream interpreting abilities. Everything comes from Hashem. So I think that when we contemplate the peeling away of the layers of nature that happens in the Yam Suf, at the Yam Suf, that we can take this connection to Yosef, connected in the words of Hallel, that the sea saw his bones and fled and parted, going completely against the laws of nature. And we can tap into that incredible emunah lesson that we learn from Yosef HaTzadik. And then Moshe Rabbeinu, who is the greatest leader that we have, and he is the one who sings the Oz Yosher Moshe of Bnei Yisrael. He is the one who leads the Bnei Yisrael in song after this miraculous salvation, and also the connection with water and Moshe Rabbeinu, that as a baby he is put into the waters of the Nile, and he is then not allowed, as part of the 10 plagues, to strike the Nile. And this isn't the Nile, this is the Yam Suf, but it is this water connection, again, coming up in a different aspect, and how water is going against its nature. And really, through Moshe Rabbeinu trying to find the best way to guide the Jewish people as they are facing this challenge of the pursuing Egyptians behind them and the sea in front of them, and while the wild animals of the desert on either side of them, what more terrifying scenario could there be? And so he is there and he's asking Hashem for guidance. And we have a combination of this great leader and the great humility as well. And he's calling out to Hashem, what should I do? And so I think the people can really see in him how, when we are faced with these challenges that are supernatural, how can we deal with them? How can we overcome them? And at one point, Moshe Rabbeinu says to Hashem, what shall we do? And Hashem says, what are you crying out to me for? Just tell them they should journey. And so this is what Moshe Rabbeinu does. And then we continue to the next personality at the Yam Suf that I'm referring to, is Nachshon ben Aminadab. And the people are frozen, very appropriately, as you'll see in a moment, as we see another metaphor for water. And he is the one who jumps in. And it's not that he just puts his big toe in the water. He has to go in, ba'u mayim ad nofesh. And the Medrash tells us the waters came literally to the point at which he would have almost been drowned. They reached his neck before the water split. And the message that we're learning from Nachshon ben Aminadab in his part at Kriyas Yam Suf is that he was prepared, that, Hashem gave the instruction, just go forward. And he managed to break away from this sense of paralysis and jump in and really potentially the waters could have carried on rising and he would have been drowned. So his faith, when there was this instruction from Hashem, he followed that and he was prepared. This is Hashem's word. This is how we live. This is what we do. And so I think that this is a message that we can carry forward on our daily life. From we can see this Mesirut Nefesh, this willingness to just, and we I think mistranslate Mesirut Nefesh as sacrifice our souls. It is literally limsor is to deliver, to hand. And so what we're doing when we are following Hashem's instructions, we are handing our soul to the ultimate receptacle of souls, to Hashem. And this is what Nachshon ben Aminadab did at this moment of challenge, of crisis for the people at the Yom Suf, just to follow the command of Hashem, and that is going to literally part the waters of the Red Sea, of the Yom Suf. And so, again, going back to this concept of water and how it is used as the vehicle for so many miracles during the closing time of our stay in Egypt and at the Yom Suf. And if we understand that we view life through, if you put water in a coloured plastic bottle, then we don't really see water. We see the green colour of the Sprite bottle or whatever other coloured plastic and receptacle is holding the liquid. If you put water in a clear plastic bottle, you will see the water, but it's holding the shape of the bottle. It's not really water itself. But if we have frozen water, then you are able, this water is not in a container, but it is just the substance of water that is holding shape because of the temperature. And this is possibly that pure element. And we know that the waters of the Yam Suf, when they were in the shape of the walls, it was like a frozen version of the water that enabled it to keep its shape. And so we are able to tap into the miraculous behavior of the water at the time of Kriyas Yam Suf, and this is helping us for our imuna, because we also say that the miracles of of Kriyas Yam Suf, of the splitting of the Yam Suf, that there are two things that are compared that are supposed to be as difficult, as it were, as splitting of the Yam Suf. Those two things are finding one's partner in life, one's zivug, koshek kriyas Yam Suf. It's as hard as splitting of the Yam Suf, and equally parnasa. Our weekly, annual earnings are as hard as splitting of the Yam Suf. And so I think a message that we can get from that is that, yes, the Yam Suf, the Kriyas Yam Suf, is something that happened historically once, and this is not something that would be repeated. This is something that we need to believe in, because if we say, if only I could see the splitting of the Yam Suf, then I would believe, there would be no doubt in my mind. But we can't have these interruptions in nature and think that we need them for our belief. There are other ways that we are able to really tap into our belief. But thinking that obviously for Hashem, everything, there's no such thing as easy or difficult. It's not like a human that has to achieve something, and certain tasks are going to be more difficult, certain tasks are going to be easier. And so whether it's the finding of our life partner, and whether it's the earning of our daily sustenance, but all of these things are on par, are miracles on par with the splitting of the Yam Suf. And so I think with this concept of the shevii shel Pesach, we get our core Jewish identity. And it's not just a question of looking at Jewish accomplishment and achievement and empathy and activism. It's not just a question of being defined by our persecutions. It's being defined by the fact that with emunah in Hashem, anything is possible, and we can have this as our way of sealing, as it were, the circle of Emunah that starts at the beginning of Pesach. And if we hold that tight and keep that as a sealed unit that we can access, then we are able to go forward after Pesach and for the whole of the year, even when we're not in this incredibly holy, saturated time where we have the influence of the past, our historical events that are constantly with us, but we are able to actually swim with that water, swim with the emunah that we have accrued through the historical events and through our keeping them alive by viewing events of every day through that prism. And in this way, we then go forward and are going to be suitable for, please God, the culmination of really the Yetzias Mitzrayim, of leaving Egypt, which is receiving the Torah 7 weeks later. And wishing everybody a very, very good Yom Tov, and hoping that everybody finds the inspiration of these eternal messages of this very special time. Thank you very much.